Scanning for audio.
Welcome to Tin Dog Podcast number 386. It saddens me to be the one, possibly to be the one who tells you about the demise of one of us. Paul Spragg, guy who worked at Bigfinish, has passed away. Paul Spragg worked at Bigfinish. He was the guy who would be on the other end. He would answer your emails and he would sort out technical things with the website. He was basically one of us. One of us working at Bigfinish. Now, you may know him because he was the guy also who co-hosted the Bigfinish podcast with Nick Briggs. So basically, Doctor Who podcasting has lost one of its own. On Friday, there was an announcement on Facebook from Natalie, Paul's partner. I'll read it out now. To all of you that I didn't manage to text yesterday, I couldn't get round to everyone. There is sad news that Paul died yesterday, suddenly. He's been unwell for a few weeks, and was due to go to the GP yesterday, but he was too breathless to be able to make it to the surgery, so they phoned him instead. They arranged for a non-emergency ambulance to come and take him to hospital, so he could be monitored. When they arrived, he was talking to them normally, and then he had a seizure. He came out of that one, and then he had another seizure, during which his heart stopped, and he stopped breathing. The ambulance crew tried to resuscitate him for 2 hours at home. Then they took him to the hospital, where they tried for a further half hour. They couldn't bring him round. I never met Paul, and I'll say that straight off. I can't class him as a friend, but what I can class him as somebody who is kind of in my life, in the same way that any podcaster that you listen to is in your life. You develop a sort of connection. You can make judgments as to whether you like someone or you wouldn't like them or anything like that. And for our sins, that's what we've done. Paul was always entertaining. I will never, ever be able to hear the word forward again without having a slight smile. This was the guy who was given the job of editing Vortex magazine live in a podcast. Everyone who seems to have worked with him doesn't seem to have a bad word to say about the guy. But most importantly, over on WordPress, his brother has left a message. If you don't mind, I'd like to read it out loud. As of now, there are only 4 people on this planet still in my life who I've known personally since birth. I lost the 5th this week, and I'll probably never fully understand why. I am of course referring to my brother Paul, who so suddenly passed away at only 38. I've lost count of how many things I've written over the years, but this is the hardest piece, and one I wish I didn't have to write. Growing up, we were so very close. Our shared allergy to summer, or hay fever as it's more commonly known, meant a lot of time rattling through Final Fantasy books and hammering away at Dizzy or Horace on the Spectrum 48K. When we did make it outside, his sporting prowess, he won't mind me revealing, wasn't the best, but he still took great delight in kicking footballs in the general direction of my nether regions, admittedly with quite often accurate results. Our play often took the form of TV show reenactments, most frequently helped by a cardboard box TARDIS. As I became the Adric to Paul's 5th Doctor, we actually met Peter Davison at the opening of a housing estate. I believe we were only 5 and 8 years old respectively. Neither of us quite realising how far the passion for Time Lords would eventually take him, but more of that later. When you've got an older sibling, it's like having an extra parent. Paul bought me, my parents may admittedly have funded it, a big fluffy cat that sat between my pillow and the bedside table, pretty much from my birth. Always there to protect me from banging my head on the wooden furniture. Little did he know that he wouldn't be the only time he looked out for me. whether he was finding me work experience or simply spoiling me, rotten each Christmas, Paul always took great pleasure in my happiness. Of course, this didn't stop him chasing me on holiday when I was about 5 and causing me to fling headlong into a chair, the scar from which still serves as a reminder today. Come to think of it, the one on my ankle from the seesaw incident has always been suspicious too, but I digress. Did we fight? Of course we did, like any siblings who care about each other would. Whether it was playfully converting spring-loaded He-Man figures into flinging mashed potato at one another, over the dinner table whilst Mum's back was turned, or a more serious throttle here and there, my immaturity would wind up Paul just as some of his straight-laced attitudes would me. But for every fight, I was always grudgingly knew he was right, older and wiser, though obviously not as attractive. He couldn't hope to rain on my entire parade. Paul was always someone you'd want on your team in a battle of intellectual superiors. As an inspiration, I obviously had my parents who both pulled out the stops for the two of us. But I also had an older brother who would test drive those important life experiences for me. From hitting university to working in the big smoke, Paul did all the things that he could then handhold me through. Over time, I overtook him, and not in a good way. I became the cynical one, always finding fault with modern society and the people within it. All the while, Paul would retain the innocent joy that could be found in everything, from comics to radio shows to films, and even the annual bag or 3 of mini-eggs. He kept life pure, pulling the curtains on the badness out there in order to settle down with a board game and a Ribena. Would I have gone down the journalistic route if it wasn't for him? No. Would I be such a nerdy sci-fi comic book guy if Paul hadn't picked my Green Lantern comics up for me, Forever People, and lent me his Target Doctor Who novelizations to read? No. Would I be half the man if Paul hadn't been there? Of course I wouldn't, because that's what Paul always did. He saw the best in everyone and brought it out of them, with patience, good humour and a childlike glint in his eye. If these qualities, which I am so pleased others have seen in him, as I have read so many tributes to my big brother, his dedication, his passion, his enjoyment of life, was so prevalent, he rarely let anything let him down. And of course he wanted to help others. Even as recent last year, while we were on holiday at the Edinburgh Fringe, he'd still boot up his laptop each day to answer bigfinish customer queries, because of his empathy towards others and his passion for the business. Talking of the business, Paul's career choice was a stroke of genius, combining hobby and salaried incomes in one fell swoop. Through the years of working with visual imagination and bigfinish, he'd often message me a "look who I'm with" picture of someone we'd grown up idolising together. He was so happy doing a job he loved, and I can only hope to find such gratification in what I do. Paul got to meet his heroes, and today I miss mine. I'd like to thank Nick for those words. So yeah, Paul's no longer with us. I think we'll all have a bag of crisps and raise it up to you, Paul. Cheers. Rest in peace, guy. You've been listening to the Tin Dog Podcast. Doctor Who and its connected properties are copyright and trademark of the BBC. No infringement is intended. To contact the show, email tin-dog@hotmail.co.uk. Whostrology, a Time Traveller's Almanac, is available through Telos Publishing or Amazon. Visit www.whostrology.com for further information. The Tin Dog Podcast is a founder member of the Doctor Who Podcast Alliance.